Well, greetings. It's great to see you, Jody. For our viewing participants, I have Jody Friend here, President and CEO of JLM HR Consulting. And I want to welcome you to another iteration of HR Masters, Wine and Wisdom. I'm Michelle, and I'll be interviewing Jody today. So welcome, Jody.
Thank you, Michelle. It's good to be here as always, and welcome to, I want to just, take a few minutes and welcome our participants as well.
Excellent. So today what we're going to be talking about, you all, is returning to the workplace post COVID-19 pandemic. And so I have several questions prepared for Jody. And so the first one is, Jody, what considerations or changes must employers make to prepare to have their staffs return to the workplace and remain safe?
Yes, so excellent question, Michelle. So employers need to consider first and foremost is safety. Have they taken all of the safety precautions to be able to reopen? And so the CDC has provided numerous guidelines on the types of safety protocols employers can take, considerations for personal protective equipment, providing masks and gloves, hand sanitizers, air purifiers. Many companies are going above and beyond to make sure that they are prepared and that their employees will be safe. So I think as long as employers keep safety, in mind as a priority, they can safely reopen. Considerations can also be, should the employer be providing, all of the, personal protective equipment? And my recommendation would be yes, because at the end of the day, it is the employer's responsibility. So face masks, the Clorox wipes, hand sanitizers, perhaps you can put together, PPE kits for your employees as they return back to the office. So that's definitely one consideration.
So what about, say, emergency response plans? Say, for instance, there is a breakout. Someone in the workplace contracts COVID, and then someone else contracts it. Would you advise that employers also have a response plan in place?
Absolutely. And hopefully, since the pandemic hit a year ago, just about a year ago, employers, I should have been preparing, their policies and procedures for how they're going to handle not only COVID, but any kind of a pandemic. That is definitely something that they need to be considering. So many employers, of course, have adopted teleworking. Many employers are now considering that to be an integral part of their everyday, workplace protocols. That's something to consider. But once again, there are certain parameters that that you want to keep in place. So once you find out that an employee has contracted COVID, there's a notification process for, notifying your staff that may have come in contact with that individual. And then there's also you have to be concerned about whether or not you're going to identify who that person is. My recommendation is, if at all possible, not to disclose who it is. But let's face it, we have a lot of small employers, and so some less than 10, and so it may be easy to guess who that person might be. But to the extent possible, employers should not disclose, who contracted COVID, but merely take the steps to notify their employees, to quarantine for the appropriate amount of time, Employees should not return to work until they have been cleared with a negative COVID policy. Employees may also consider whether or not they actually get a COVID test. If they quarantine and they don't have any symptoms, it's not necessarily a requirement that they get a COVID test. So that's something that the employee can determine, what's in their best interest. But they certainly should take those precautions to quarantine. And hopefully, again, the employer has taken all of the steps to provide for a teleworking environment.
Excellent, excellent. So another question for you, because this pandemic has been with us for so long, and there's no immediate end in sight. Do you think that organizations need to make some adjustments to, say, their sick leave policies, for instance? And if so, what might you recommend?
Yes, and so, again, hopefully most employers have already taken a look at their sick leave policies. Shortly after, the pandemic was announced, and many states were, you know, requiring that everyone stay at home. Uh, you know, the law for the Families First Coronavirus Act was passed that actually had some mandated sick leave provisions in that law. That law, however, with the exception of perhaps one or two states, the District of Columbia being one of them, expired in at the end of December of 2020. However, District of Columbia, for example, it has extended the sick leave requirement through April 1st. So for certain size employers with 500 or less employees, they were required to provide for up to 2 weeks of sick leave pay.
Mhm.
Since the guideline is now expired, employers still have the opportunity on a voluntary basis to provide that same level of sick leave if they don't already have a sick leave policy in place. I would also encourage employees to take employers to take a look at their own state sick leave laws, because there could be requirements there that would be applicable above and beyond, what the Families First Coronavirus Act required.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your guidelines, and I'll do a quick summary of what I believe I heard, and I might even augment based on my research. Now, one of the things that I did find in my research is that OSHA as well has very explicit guidelines on readying the workplace. So they talk about things like installing hygiene stations, for instance, making sure that they have plastic barriers between employees. The communication strategy, they definitely have to have a communication strategy throughout while we're in this transition, going back to work, and until, we have deemed that we no longer have to take those precautions. So they have to have engineering controls. And so that's like high efficiency ventilation systems and things of that nature. And then also the administrative controls are the things that you talked about, the policies, some guidance, protocols around remaining safe. So it's more than a notion, yes?
Yes, it is. Absolutely, Michelle. So, we one of our clients happens to be a school. So they have taken every precaution to provide for the safety of not only the students that are able to return, and the teachers that have volunteered to return at this point in time. They have made sure that their filters and their HVAC systems are of the highest quality. They have taken precautions to put the signage on the floor, on the doors. They have provided for one way in, one way out. They have provided for grab and go lunches. They are providing the teachers with the plexiglass barriers. They are also taking steps to make sure that they keep the children and the teachers in a pod so that they can do contact tracing. I mean, so I could go on and on about all of the precautions that they have taken. I mean, sealed classrooms once, because they're not back in school every day, and they're not back in school all day. But once that classroom is, the class is completed for the day, they actually defog the room with sanitizer and they seal it off. They do not reopen it until it's time to return to the classroom. So that's an example of the types of protocols, safety protocols that have to be in place. So if your organization is a restaurant, or again, if your workplace requires that most of your employees be at the workplace, again, consult the OSHA guidelines, consult the CDC guidelines, and take every precaution that you can to maintain a safe environment.
Excellent. So I do appreciate you for your wisdom. And I just want to remind our viewing audience that there is guidance on preparing workplaces for COVID-19. It's a publication produced by OSHA, and there are also, of course, CDC guidelines. So make sure that you reference those guidelines before you welcome your employees back to work. So thank you again for the great information that you provided. Look forward to our next encounter. Bye for now.